All right, hello and welcome back to another tutorial in Maya. Glad to see you're stopping back. Check this out today. It's all about particles and NCloth. Now the last tutorial I did kind of showed you how to take a locator and make nParticles attach themselves to an NCloth. Well, in this case, we're going to make particles inside of a sphere, basically explode, and out they go. So that's what today's tutorial is all about. Now, here's the interesting thing: is you can assign a tearable surface to an NCloth, and so essentially what it does is it just rips itself open and particles go flying out. Now on the looking at it here, it doesn't really look all that interesting. I mean, it's a piece of fabric and some particles, but if you attach something like maggots to this and make this look like meat, well, it might look like there was like a gory explosion of something. But this effect with a tearable surface can also help you create debris effects and shrapnel and all sorts of other stuff. So anyway, that's kind of the point. It's about the concept here. It's about being able to control your particles as they're inside of an object and having that object, rip apart and blow out particles or blow out something. So that's what we're all about today. Now, before we get into it, let me give you a word from our sponsors. Now, here's the deal. Lester Banks is a subscriber of mine, and he has this awesome blog, and it's called lesterbanks.com. So, bookmark his site, go there often, check it out. If he has all sorts of different stuff on here, and he trolls the web and finds some of the best tutorials. That's on Maya and other programs as well, After Effects, you name it. So go to lesterbanks.com and take a look at his stuff, bookmark him, because he's cool. He's a CG guy and he finds cool stuff, so go check him out. All right, so there you go. That's Lester. Let's see that again. I'd just like to see the fast animation flying in there. All right, lesterbanks.com. Now let's open up a scene here. Particles are kind of finicky. There's not really, it's really hard to describe. They never really behave the way you think they're going to behave. But let me show you what we're up to. In this scene right now, I have two NCloth objects. And these started as a cube, and they've been smoothed, and now they're just spheres. So I have about 800 frames on the animation here. We'll just go ahead and take a play at the start. Now, I have my X-ray on right here. So if I had my X-ray off, I wouldn't be able to see those particles. But let's watch what happens if I just let it play here for a little bit. Eventually the particles start working their way out toward the surface of this NCloth. And what these particles are doing right now is they're filling up the inside of this NCloth. And right here at about frame 200, you can see where they're starting to have an effect. And, that's cool because this could just be an undulating blob of something. I don't know, put a weird texture on there, but you get the idea. But really when you're working with, like, say, a particle explosion from the inside out, I want to kind of see what those particles are up to in there. So I'm going to just push pause for a second, escape, and I'm going to basically go up here and go back into my, X-ray mode. That way I can see inside of here. So let's keep playing this animation. And you'll notice that the particles are just filling up this surface. And as an NCloth, you can assign these various types of NCloth. This one is a rubber sheet. Okay, so essentially it's just going to keep expanding like a balloon, and these particles are filling up this balloon. But what you have to keep in mind here is that there's a couple of different properties we have to work with. And they're very finicky, nParticles and Tearable Constraints, because what we're going to be doing to this ultimately is that it's going to rip open, and we can make that happen by adjusting the glue strength and some other properties, or we can make it happen by, say, increasing this this particle size. There's a couple of different things we can do. So anyway, that just gives you an idea of kind of where we're at, or what we're going to do here is we're going to make some of these spheres and yeah, turn them into NCloths and make them explode. Okay, so let's do this. Let's create a new scene and basically just start from the beginning. So I'll just come up here. We'll go to new scene. I don't need to save those changes. Now, right away, let's just set this timeline to like 800 or something like that. That gives us enough time to let a simulation play out. Okay, so check that you're in your polygon menu set and come over and just create, you know, a couple of, actually we want to do a polygon primitive cube. Okay, and just go ahead and make a cube, any size cube, it doesn't really matter. And I'm gonna sort of check that. I might want to go into my wireframe, whatever, but let's look at this cube real quick. Come over here to your tabs, get to your polycube 1, get to your all of these subdivisions here, and let's just clean it up, give it just a single surface of 1. All right, and there it is. So now we just have a single surface on each side, and that's cool. And let's just make it a real cube and actually just set this value to like 8. That's a good round number. All right, so there you go, nothing too complicated. Now let's actually center that out. Come over here and give it a 0 in each of those, and there you go, centered out. Now we're ready basically to create an NCloth out of this, but not quite yet. What we want to do real quickly, I'm going to do a Command D and just duplicate that object. Well, maybe not. Let's put that one back at 0 for a second here. Sometimes my screen flick recording program conflicts with some of my commands and stuff in here, but so, you know, I gotta it's kind of weird. Sometimes I have to come up into the menus, so I'll just duplicate it basically like right there. All right, so here we go. Got 2 of them. Now with the first one over here, let's go back into our tabs. Make sure you're in your tabs. And you'll notice, you know, we have a polycube shape, and these are basically both the same thing, so that's cool. Now, switch over into the, actually stay in polygons, come to your mesh, and we're going to smooth both of these real quick. So I'm just going to apply smoothing to that, and that sort of takes that, you know, cube down into more like a sphere. I'm going to do the same thing to here. I'm going to just go ahead and smooth that one as well. Now, we'll click on this first one, and you'll notice that because we smoothed it, we now have a poly smooth face. And you could name this anything you want as far as your objects go. Like you could name it Sphere 1 or Sphere 2, it doesn't matter. But what we're interested in is giving it a little more detail. You see how like angular it is right there. We want it to be really smooth like a sphere. So by just creating another level, by going up to 3 divisions on your level right there, you'll get a sphere basically. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to this one. And you'll notice that this is my poly smooth face 2. We'll go ahead and give it a smoothing of 3. And now we have basically 2 identical objects. Now with this one, what we're going to do is we're going to come over into the N Dynamics system and grab your menu there. And you'll notice that you have some various properties up here. What we're interested in is making this object right here an NCloth. So simple, just click on NCloth. Don't worry about your options for right now because we're going to set a preset on this. So hit NCloth. Right away you get your tabs, NCloth and its nucleus, which, you know, controls some basic properties about how this thing's going to move about and stuff. So what we're interested in right now is getting into the NCloth shape and go into the preset, and we'll attach the rubber sheet to it because that's what I've been working with. All right, so now that we have that, go ahead and press play and just see what happens. Well, it falls, and by default that's what will happen. So we want to change that first in the nucleus. We want this to sort of remain in the center right there. So let's just take the gravity down to 0. All right, and hit play. And you'll notice that it doesn't go anywhere. Great, that's what we want, so we'll leave it like that. Now, this object we're not going to worry about at the moment. So really what we're doing here is we're creating this NCloth object. We're giving it a shape or a preset, which is the rubber. And now we want to fill this thing with particles. So go up into your nParticles, and we're going to create a particle emitter. Choose balls. That'll give us kind of a good idea where we're starting at. And go ahead and hit Create Emitter. Now, if you play this back, by default, I'm going to go back into X-ray mode here. By default, the origin point is right here in the center, and that's where your emitter, basically is going to be starting from. So I'll go ahead and push play. And there you go. We have particles that are inside there. And you'll notice they'll be filling up that object. And at some point they'll start stretching this outer boundary. And it all depends on what size your particles are, what the radius of these particles in this case is. So, it's kind of hard to start working with particles. I'm getting a general idea here because my particles, I'm going to hit Escape. And let's take a look at this particle shape for a second. You'll notice that I have a radius of 2. You might have a different radius. I think by default it's at 2. So you could raise this up a little bit, or like say go to 0.5 or something like that. You want to play around with your radius first. Let's go back to the beginning. There you go. So that's a pretty big radius, and you can see where they start to fill the object up. They're still being contained, and that's a good thing. At some point, you'll notice that particles will start to escape. I'm going to roll out here. Yeah, at some point, you'll have particles that sort of build up in here and start escaping. Well, there's 2 ways to deal with that. In this case, I'm not having to worry about it yet, and we're already at frame 260, but round about one of these frames, it may decide to go wonky. So anyway, just something to be aware of. I'm going to go ahead and we'll pause that. And let's change this radius to like say 0.3, and let's see what happens. Maybe rewind, let them go. So there you go. Even by default, sometimes I find these particles can be very hard to control. You don't always get absolutely consistent results, but I mean technically you do, but it takes a lot of tweaking to really make them stick and to be able to control them. And that's really part of what we're looking at here is the concept. So you want to be able to control these particles. Now, it looks pretty good so far. I've got particles inside of there. They're not busting out. There's nothing really happening, which is good. That's kind of what we want when we're first dealing with this effect. So I'm going to hit pause there for a second. And let's see here. Let's look at the nucleus. Well, no. Let's do this. Let's go back to this NCloth shape itself and take a look at its various properties. You're going to have all of the menu system here. Remember, it's going to have stickiness and thickness and scale and width. Right now this is a rubber surface, and I could bring that thickness way down or way up. That's going to make a big impact on how the particles react in here. I could change the friction and the stickiness, and that could pull the particles more outward. So there's a lot of things to start messing around with here before you actually get a good result with nParticles and this whole Tearable Constraint thing. So anyway, just something to be aware of. That's one place to start. Now, we also want to look at the emitter itself, okay? And be aware that in the emitter, you're going to have your radius and your radius scale and stuff. And For the moment, what we're just interested in is the particle size, because we're just trying to keep everything consistent. So we're going to make those things grow, and you'll notice gravity's down to 0, but there still is some gravitational direction. And let's see here, with the emitter itself, you have a speed attribute that's going to have a big effect on what's happening on this scene. So anyway, okay, where were we? We've created our particles and everything is looking good. We can set the timeline. We got that. Now we basically have everything ready, and what we want to do is we want to assign a tearable surface, okay, to this NCloth object right here. So that's actually the polycube 1 in your outliner, if you notice. So make sure that you're sort of on your polycube 1 and not your actual NCloth object. So we're working with the cube itself right now, okay? So go ahead and select that, and in your menu system up here you'll see your N constraint, and if you come down you'll notice you have a tearable surface. So if you just click on your tearable surface, there it is. Now let's just play through this by default and see what happens with this sort of with the scenario we have set up here. We'll let the particles grow, and in this simulation, Maya's figuring out, oh well, this rubber sheet it's now a tearable surface, so it's going to rip open and do whatever it wants to do. As it emits more particles. Now there's a lot of particles being emitted from here, and you'll notice that the timeline slows down quite a bit. I'm on a pretty good Mac, but you're getting particles in there, so this isn't necessarily real time. So you will have to do some play blasts and stuff like that to kind of get a grip on how fast your simulation is working. But in this case it's growing, and at some point before 800 it should burst open, and those particles should go flying out of there, and there they go. Okay, so I'm gonna hit escape here for a second. I'm gonna pause that right there. Even though it went in slow motion, the frame rate's actually a lot higher. But you'll notice that there you have your surfaces on the NCloth, and they're ripping open and out they go. And let's see, we could probably take a view from, well, let's see, let's go to this side and let's see what that looks like. Okay, so you can see where this is real jagged. It doesn't look like ripped paper or anything like that, and this is just something to deal with on this level. Sometimes when you have particles contained in here, you're going to turn off the visibility at the moment of reaction on this surface. So if it's an explosion or something, you'd turn this off. But just as a concept, we're looking at, that's what it looks like. All right, well, that's all cool. You get the idea on that. It's sort of different, and it won't be different every time, but if you make a change on this, it's going to react a lot differently. And let me maybe show you, let's see, I'm going to show you what happens with this now. Now that we have a constraint on this surface, if you open up your outliner, make sure that you look for your dynamic constraint 1, because that's indicating this, dynamic constraint that's on this surface. So that's really cool. Well, if you click it, you'll get all sorts of properties over here. And basically what we're interested in at the moment, just with this simulation, is this strength and the glue strength. And you got a glue strength scale. Now, everything is going to be different. You can kind of tell where glue strength is sort of like the strength of the glue. And the scale strength, the higher you bring this, the more it's going to be harder to, harder to bust open. So it's just something to keep in mind for the moment. Sometimes you can lower this glue strength, or you could raise it up. For right now, I'm going to go with like a 0.3 on the glue strength, and then on the scale, maybe like a 0.8. Okay, and I'll start my simulation from there. We'll take a rewind, and then let's see what happens. Basically, this is going to define that surface and give that surface some various properties about, you know, when it should bust open. And you know, in this case, it's going to take a few frames here, but it may contain it for longer, or it may contain it for less time. But really, those two properties right there are what you're really interested in here as far as controlling your overall, you know, surface. Like, when will it break? And there you go. Okay, so let's see. Let it go. It's this is a slow process. Anytime you're dealing with these nParticles and tearable constraints, you're dealing with your processing power in your computer, plus you're dealing with the amount of information that's coming out of this particle emitter. You're dealing with, you know, all sorts of complex movement with everything, not just that you can see, but everything that goes down into that center of that sphere, you know. So it's a lot of faces, and you know, this may be way too much. And at some point you're going to say, well, I'm not really getting results with this at the point that I want it to be, you know, having an effect. So I don't know, in this case I might up the radius size of the particles. I'll push pause there. Might take those particles and then move them up as far as the radius goes. So if you go into your nParticle shape and maybe make these like 0.500, we'll go back to the beginning here, and that might, you know, with our glue strength reset and a new size on these, they're a lot larger, so they may have a tendency to want to break out of there faster. Well, yeah. Like I said, I wish I had the perfect solution for the perfect, you know, say by frame 400 all these things will break open. You just kind of have to find a balance first, you know. So there they go. I'm going to hit escape here for a second, and we'll see what happened. So at you know, frame 214, they decided to bust out. And that's not real time. Remember, that's, you know, that's, let's go into, take that off and take a look at it. So you can see where, you know, if this were the right material and it came flying out like that, you might have an isolated, nice kind of flyby, you know, shrapnel and debris kind of effect or whatever. But that's kind of the idea. Now, sometimes you want to be able to control where it rips along the surface. And that's why we built this next one right here. What you want to do is, let's say we get rid of, let's get rid of this guy right here. Let's leave our emitter, and I'm going to take this one and maybe pull it over into, let's pull this over to 0. Okay, so now I have basically the same NCloth object over the emitter. But I haven't assigned this a surface yet. We haven't done anything with this. So, you know, we could do one of two things. You know, we need to go to the constraint and make it a tearable surface. But before we do that, okay, before we do that, what you have to do is come into your vertex mode and define, like, say, a tearable surface. So if you wanted it to rip, we could mark out some vertices right here. And choose some vertices and then make it a tearable surface. Okay, so essentially that's how you would control your rip. So I'm going to choose this one right here. I don't know if you're going to get your coloring mode like this, but in this case I'm going to just shift click on the other these other vertices right here. Make sure they're on there. I'm going to shift click a couple more. And I think I'll just come down here and click on a couple more down here. Okay, So now I've chosen some vertices. And if I come up to my end constraint now and go ahead and make that a tearable surface, I'll go ahead and do that. If I click off of here, technically, what did I do wrong? Might be getting ahead of myself here. Let's see here. Well, there are particles in there, and there are particles that are going to come flying out. Okay, so I probably didn't constrain this right. So anyway, let's do this. I'm gonna do a couple of Z maneuvers. We'll just what do we do? We'll just keep undoing some of these. All right. We'll undo one more. Nope. We'll redo that one. Cool. Okay, so here we go. Let's see what our particles are doing. They're going out, they're coming out, so it's not even a tearable surface yet. So I'm going to come back down here. Let's go back into maybe this mode here real quick. And let me check my notes. I made some notes on this, which are really cool. And if I can find them, because this part of the process will give you really good results with being able to control this control this effect. And right now I'm looking through one of my books, because this exercise comes like straight out of the Autodesk manual about the NCloth stuff. And let's see, it's really a useful concept. That's kind of why I'm going over this. And let's see. Here we go. And that's another thing. When I tell you about books, reading the books, sometimes these manuals are so awesome because everything is right here in front of you, and you can kind of refer to it as you work with this stuff. But in here they say, designing tearing surface, you can specify exactly where you'd like the tearing to occur on a surface by selecting specific vertices before applying the tearable surface constraint. So, technically I thought that's what we did. We went in here, went to our vertexes, and we chose, some of these vertices. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that one, and I'll click that one and that one. And I'm holding my shift button down as I'm doing this. So, shift click a bunch. And there you go. So technically, we should be able to go up into our end constraint and actually make that a tearable surface. And now that it's there, technically it should rip at that point. Usually you see your vertices sort of right there. Okay. You know what? I know exactly what the problem is. I made a copy of the first sphere, and essentially the end solver doesn't like that, because this particle system was being used with that first end object or end cloth. So in this case, let's just analyze this a little bit and figure out where we went wrong. I'm going to go back here and just basically delete this guy. We'll go back into our object mode, and let's just delete everything. Alright, now we can probably go back and create one of those guys again. Of course, make sure you're on your polygon. I'm sorry. Okay, so you can see where sometimes along the way weird stuff happens that you try. This is a tutorial, so I just tried to set them both up like that, but rather than have it go awry, we'll just create a new object there. And let's go in there and let's give that its same starting properties of 1, 1, and 1. And let's go back up here and do 8, 8, and 8. All right, so there we go. I like this YouTube. They give me more time to do a tutorial now, so that's cool. All right, so we have our object, and go ahead and grab it right there. And now we can switch over to the mesh and go to a smooth, and let's give that a smoothing of 3. That makes it the sphere. And let's see, now we can go from the sphere, we can go over here to our end dynamics, and we can actually come to the end mesh and create an NCloth. Alright, so now it's an NCloth. We'll give it a real quick preset of, say, like a rubber sheet. We'll replace that. And now we can create our particles. So we'll go to Particles, Create Particles. We'll just create that emitter. And there it is. So it should be sitting right in the middle there. And we'll take a play. And those particles will sort of build up in there, and they will, you know, they'll do their thing. Particle thing. Okay, so now we have basically the same thing going on. Particles filling that up, and at some point, see, right now the particles are filling that object up nicely, and you know, they're not flying outside of the surface here. And sometimes if particles start flying out of the surface and they're not being contained by your NCloth, you'll need to look inside of your nucleus, and you'll notice that there's a solver attribute here called substeps. And sometimes by increasing the substeps, it will help contain these particles better. But you know, I've found conflicting results with lots of different things concerning that. So essentially, I leave my substeps alone, and I sort of give my particle shape a size in here, a size value that will, you know, split the surface. So anyway, that's just something to be aware of. Substeps don't always, you know, help to keep particles inside of this. So anyway, it looks like we're going pretty good here. We've got particles going up, and that's cool. So let's see if we can get that surface to rip in a specific area. So I'm going to go ahead and click back on here in object mode and right click, and we'll go to Vertex. And in this case, let me just pick these vertices. So I'll go ahead and click on that one, and I'm going to shift click on this one, and shift click that, and shift click that, and shift click, and maybe come over here a little bit and do a couple of those. We'll do that one, and maybe that one, and this one. I don't know. Okay, so anyway, got that. Now what I want to do is do a constraint and do a tearable surface. Okay, so you can see where this worked this time, because now I have these indicators here that this is where the tear is going to happen. But there will be a small rip that happens right here, and this will probably rip out and let things out there. So you can only do this before you like select your rip before you go in and do your tearable surface. Okay, so you select these, and then when you create that tearable surface, that's when it takes effect. All right, so let's just play through this and maybe see what happens. And I think I might want to go into that mode, and we'll let it play through, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, sorry about having to recreate this. You have to be very specific with some of this particle stuff. You can't just duplicate things in some ways and think that it's going to react the same way, because a duplicate object is not necessarily a totally separate object. So just something to be aware of. All right. Don't have any ripping yet, and it doesn't look like my particles have even gotten to the outer part here, and it just keeps on building in there, and I'm not noticing really any kind of shape differential here. So in this case, I may want to up my particle size a little bit. So I'll go ahead and hit escape, and maybe come over to the outliner, find my particle, and take this radius up a bit from maybe 200 to, say, maybe 400. Let's go 300 and just sort of stay. So we'll go 300 there. Now you're going to have to rewind, of course, and you always want to rewind so you can kind of see what's happening there. So now we have a little bit larger particle size, and it is having an effect on the surface a little earlier in the animation. And at some point, this will bust open. And you can see where it's sort of, moving around, and I may have to back off a little bit here. And you can see where it's starting to open up right now, and some particles are starting to escape. All right, let's take a look at that. I'm going to go back here out of that mode. And as you can see, just where we decided to make those particles come out is where they're exiting. So, the radius of the particle is sort of having more of an effect here. Now, remember that you can always come into your dynamic constraint and change the properties of your strength, your glue strength, and that's going to have a lot to do with it. Okay, so just play around with that. It's all about the concept, and it's really a fun particle exercise. So, it's going to take hours and hours of playing with it, but that's essentially how you work with this stuff. And the more complex you get as objects, remember this is just a cube that we kind of smoothed into a sphere, but you can do this with more complex geometry. So, just make a model of something and attach, and make it an NCloth, and then work with it in this same manner, and you should get kind of the same result. So anyway, that's it, straight out of the book. I love the Maya Autodesk Mastering book series. So remember, it's kind of one of the best investments you can make in your mind. So it's always good to have the book, and this is straight out of the book, which is cool because it kind of gives you a really good introduction to, the nParticle Tearable Surface. All right. So there you go. I'm tired. It's been a good tutorial. I got to thank all my subscribers and everybody out there for really being supportive and really learning something. So that's a good thing. All right. So anyway, there you go. Be a good person. Have a great day, and read a book, preferably the owner's manual. All right, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you at the next one.